Okay, so what you noticed that you should have done, or what are you noticing on the screen that you may not have had end of Thursday? Okay, the edit test. So that's what I'm expecting to see on all of your individual projects. I spoke to a few of you that whatever we do in class applies on your project, the individual project to class project. We'll discuss, I had a sort of a to-do list for, there are exactly, including today, there are 10 classes. It's exactly a month. I think it's April 26th, 30 days. So you have to really push on your group project. Some of you are, others, well, it's, I will make myself available tonight, so it's up to you. So what I want to see is this. You should have your Test Explorer, run your Test Explorer, and it should, and so this obviously should have the green check marks. And the other is I want to see your edit test. So this one, so there were a couple of projects, individual projects, where there wasn't any code for testing. So I want to see that you have tested. And so I want you to have this, essentially I should be able to see this method here, and I want you to make it just large enough that I can see the entire edit instructor method. And obviously you want to see all three check marks. So what do these tests ensure? What functionalities? Add edit, and this is what does this do? The return list is, essentially it is the select operation with multiple objects. So you have read, add, so of the CRUD operations we have C, R, and U. The only one missing is the D. So my expectation is you have done this. How many of you have done this? Okay, so this, Jorge said, okay, something like halfway in between with testing. There's no halfway in between. It either works or it doesn't, right? So the thing is either you have a green check mark or not. And obviously, the only way the green check mark is meaningful is if you have the test set up. So So what I want to see you, as I said, is to have those two windows open so that I can come around to see that you have done this. I'll pause the recording so that it's not blank for a long time. Okay, why am I particular that you learn to test? Your logic, that's really the only way to consistently test whether your logic is working or not. So, so that's something that I want to see on your project as well. We discussed the add loss clause. The edit is fairly similar. Again, we didn't have, as far as the way you set it up, there are some additional pieces that you need to bring in. So what are those additional pieces? If you go to the instructor's controller, we didn't have an edit functionality, edit method set up on the controller. Okay, so is it sufficient to set up? Well, if you had done what we were testing was essentially let me increase the size here. Okay, with add and edit, typically you're going to have how many methods on the controller? You're going to have two. The first one is to show the user the view, and the second one is the post where the user provides the values. So that's the concept here for having two edit methods. Now, the one that we are really testing is the post method, but I've just shown the get method as well. And in this case, the get method, you're trying to find the instructor, the object that you want to edit. And the reason you want this object is what? When you create the view, you need to send what to the view? The object, right? And why do you send the object to the view? Why would you send the object? Why would you retrieve the instructor object and send it to the view? What's the purpose of it for editing purposes? Jacob? So the difference between edit and add, as Jacob just pointed out, edit, there's a pre-existing instructor. With add, you don't have any pre-existing instructor object. So what is the user doing? They are changing existing values. So how do you show the existing values? By retrieving the instructor object. And then I'm sending it to the, like whatever user enters is going to be all of these parameter values. I send it to the, well, for it to be changed here. And this is where the second concept comes in. Previously, we were going directly to the database. What are we doing here? Going to the interface. So we are basically, so now the additional pieces are with in your interface, you need the edit method. And I also have this find method to find the pre-existing instructor. And then I have to implement it in the class that implements the interface. So you have these. So you have to do those three steps before you So I need to have my edit instructor, and one of the things I've said for testing, for unit testing, you need to make the methods return whether it has completed the task or not. So so all your saves need to be async saves. So when you're practicing this, applying it on your projects, for the only operation among the CRUD operations, that is select, add, delete, and update, the only one among those three that is async is the add operation. The other three are not add. So where the async comes in is when you save it. Okay. So the implementation of the interface going to the database is an async method. Then when you get to the controller, so here's my edit right here. This is an asynchronous method which waits for whether the task, the edit operation going to the database or any data source was completed, and so it gives you whatever after the task is completed, what's the result? It redirects you to a view. Okay. So now when we are testing it, what do we need to do? The arrange part is actually the most extensive part. I'm creating a mock repository which is mocking the interface. The reason we are doing it obviously is for the controller constructor. What does it want? It wants an interface object, right? So, or something that implements this interface. So literally we are using mocking to say we are creating a mock. So even if you totally disconnect the database, you will still be able to test this functionality, even if you don't have any other data source behind, because this mock now essentially is mocking the database itself, saying the data is coming from here. Do you understand that concept? Yes, no. And this is where I said there is really no, I have not found at least, and I've spoken to some developers, there's no way of testing if you don't have, especially for add and for edit, there's no way of testing unless you have a async method. Okay, so when I say async method, what we are trying to call is the async version of edit instructor. So you can see I'm setting this up. All of this is the setup or arrangement. So I'm basically saying I'm setting up the mock repository, and what am I saying? I'm going to use the edit instructor method, which is I'm going to use this from the mock repository, and what am I going to pass it? And this is it. They call it when you say this fluently, so they actually say the fluent syntax. So you have to say it as though this is one single flowing sentence. So it is any instructor. So what are you doing? I'm passing edit instructor any instructor object. So that's what you're doing here. And what are we saying? We are expecting a return of. We are waiting until the task is completed, right? The task, where is the task getting completed? Over here, right? So it's saying async methods always, you have to know whether it was completed or not. and when it completes, it comes back and tells you, I'm done. And when it's done, what do we want to do? We want to go in and check for the object that it's worked on. And what's the object it's going to have worked on? Instructor object, right? So at the end of it, you have, with the data binding, you have an instructor object. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense. So at this point, we are saying, okay, we are going to pass this edit instructor, an instructor object, and at the end of it, we will get back whatever object it worked on. And then we say we are going to create the controller object, and for the controller object to do its work, what does it require, the constructor? It requires us to send the repository object. So when you look at this, what am I saying? I'm constructing the object, sending the mock repository object. So it's important that you add this dot object. If not, it won't recognize it as a mock-up of the of this interface. Okay, and then what am I doing? This is, as I said, the actual action. I'm creating an actual instructor, and then what am I doing? Passing it to the controller for it to do its work. And I have to wait until it's done before I get the result, and then I can make my assertions. And for this to work, what should I do? When I'm asserting that two objects are equal, what? Yeah, I have to have the I comparable. Without that, I cannot compare two objects. Okay, so all of this you have to understand and apply on your project. And as I said on the exam, I'll be expecting you to be able to do that. And the only way you'll really understand, and that's why I wanted you to try this edit on your own. And the other issue is, since we are dealing with async objects, and we need to await the edit instructor on the controller, whenever inside a method you have to wait for a task to complete, that method also gets designated as an async. So if I remove this and made it void, okay, so you can see that. Can you see what happened? It says it cannot await because you can. So the issue is there is no method that's calling this test method. So you can say, well, why am I doing this? That's because inside you are basically calling a method that's an async method, and so if that's the case, this method inside which you're calling the async method also has to be designated as an async method. And if it's an async method, the task has to be specified as to whether it's completed or not. So that's something to keep in mind. There are several sub-steps. You have to do it a little carefully. And over the next couple of days, I'll be going over your projects. So hopefully you're working and applying these concepts, testing on your projects. So if you have any questions, I was going to go over delete, but I'll do that next class so that we complete the entire set of testing operations for the CRUD. Okay, any questions? Okay, I told you for your project I want to see this on at least 2 different clauses. So choose 2 clauses and apply this. And all of you, actually if there are 3 members in a group, I would recommend having 3 clauses so each of you does at least one entire set. Okay. there are some, I wanted to bring up some notes. This is relevant only to, I think, 4 or 5 students. Most students have a reasonable size for their, well, the eCampus doesn't allow you to upload files for assignments if it's about 20 megabytes. So Dave, and there are a couple of others, I think, Jorge, I think your project is coming, I forget, there are 2 others, it's at 19, and Paige, I think you might also be very close to the 20 megabytes. There are 2 or 3 other students. Most others are 7 megabytes or less. So Carter actually found this out. Is it in the bin or the object? Where is this where it's taking up a lot of space? So if you have a release version, we are basically working with the debug version. So Carter had sort of looked inside and found that if you right now over here we've been only working with the debug. If you go to the release version, it creates an entire new directory, a folder with a lot more files. So Carter found that it was, what was it, about 13 MB or so? 35? Okay. And was it in the bin directory and then the OBJ? Was it anywhere else? Okay. So check your projects to see if you have the debug as well as release versions. And Dave, that's your problem. Yeah. Yeah. Carter, you said you could just delete the entire folder. Okay. Okay, so that's good practice. You heard what he said. Okay. So next class, there were 2. I don't know whether, Jorge, you had to submit it through FileLocker, right, the exam? But that was because you were late? Okay. Okay, anyways, that's, if that is the case, Carter found this out. So the other note that I wanted to make, is there anyone having project questions, group project questions that you want to meet me this evening around 6 o'clock? If you want to meet, I will be there. If not, I'm not going to be there. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can cover that, but like our project right now is depending on functionality, which is like assigning the role to a user for the UI.
Okay, we are going to discuss that today. Okay. So essentially, so anyways, if you had a question, if you wanted to meet today, I was going to be trying to make myself available. But if nobody is going to be coming, then I won't be there. So creating a user with role. As I said, I'm looking at projects today and tomorrow. So if you have not done, if your projects are not working, I won't even look at it. And I will just give a failing grade on the project. That's why I want to make myself available. Some groups, as I said, have made use of what I was discussing, others have not. And then at that point, I'm going to leave it as is. You have, as I said, exactly a month, and you have to commit to it. I cannot tell you anymore. It's actually, why should I get stressed? You should get stressed, right? It's your responsibility. If you don't put in the work, I'm wanting to make it very clear. If you're not putting in the work, I'm not just giving you a grade. And some of you know you didn't do well on the exam, you're not doing well on the project, so I don't know what you're expecting. Are you expecting to just be given a grade? I'm not going to do that. I hope it's very clear, right? Okay, so you know how you are doing. Some of you have done very poorly on the exam as well as on the project, so you have to, that's why I'm trying to make myself available, and the groups that are meeting me are actually the groups that have actually already figured stuff out. So anyways, so the functionality I want to work on is creating a user with role through the UI, and also sending a link to the email to validate. So that's the additional piece that we will try to work on. For that, you need to have a Gmail account. I'm assuming most of you have a Gmail account, right? An email account with through Google. So that's one thing we'll do. It takes, so I'll go through it one step at a time. So I'm not going to be there this evening since nobody said you're wanting to meet with me, right? Is there anyone who wants? Okay, that's fine. I'm not. I have other things to do with my life. I'm going to run in the Arboretum actually. And forget all about anything to do with students. So coming back to this, what are we trying to do? We are going to work with some pre-existing modules because the security module is provided to us, and you have to do this step by step. So I'm going to take you through the steps. Hopefully 40 minutes hopefully will be sufficient. So we start with the, so if I were to run this, so for most groups, this is probably a requirement where so far we have been creating the users and roles through DB initialize. We want to obviously set it up through an interface so that somebody other than a developer can create roles, create users with roles. Currently, if I go to register, the only thing that I can do is provide an email and a password. But what I want to do is also to provide like a first name, last name, and so on. First, what are all the attributes? First name, last name. Where's my application user? Okay, first name, last name.
Email, phone number.
Okay, email, phone number. Okay. Okay. So there are first name, last name, email. So there are the places where we need to go, and also there are two types of users, right? You have application user, who is, we said, is just a coordinator, but we also have departments here, who is a subclass of user, who is also connected to a department. So this is actually, it starts to become more complex when you're creating even a regular user. You want a little more than what you can provide through this interface. So what we are going to do is work with let's see how many pieces we are going to work with. One file is going to be it's the account controller. So that's one place where we'll where we'll make some modifications. The other is the account view model, the register view model. What are view models used for? It's for the user interface, so that's why they're called view models. But since they're also called models, it is a class. Okay, so it's not just a view. Okay, so that's one place we are going to make modifications. The second, as I said, is the account controller, which is going, the specific methods are going to be register. There are two versions of register. Why are there two versions of register? Well, I'm going to ask somebody other than Abdul Rahman. Why do we have two methods for register? Yeah. No, it's not for two types of users. Actually, it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't know there are two types of users. But conceptually, what is register? Okay, yeah. Get and post, but why? What is it doing? What is register doing? Okay. Okay, so what operation is it? Yeah, it's an add. It's a create operation. So anytime you have adding, the basic concept is you provide the user something to input, and then we take that. So the get method is providing the user the interface, and then the post method. So these two we will change. Okay, so what is so the view model, the controller, and then what is going to be involved? Can you take a reasoned guess? We have a controller, we have a view model, and what are the pieces there? Well, there is your view itself, right? So you're going to have a view to register the user. Okay. So these are the three main places where we are going to make changes. Okay, let's start with the register view model. Okay, what's missing? I'm just going to copy paste some of this. So we are missing first name. In the view model, we are missing first name, last name, the phone, and the we need to know the user role, and we need to know the department if the user is a department chair. Now there's one concept that we'll discuss. As far as department, the department ID or department is concerned, it pertains only to department chair. If it's coordinators, it doesn't. It's not applicable. But so that UI is a little more challenging to do. So we won't do it now. I'm trying to experiment and see. We might need to get into some JavaScript for doing that. But for now, we are not going to worry about it. So what we need to do is set up. So you can see that each of these we have said are required, email, the password, and then you can do a comparison here to see if the password and the confirm password are the same. And how do you do that? Just by using the compare method. So what's it comparing with? It's comparing confirm password with the password. Okay, so if they are not the same, it's going to give this error message. So you can actually control a lot of user entry using using these view models. Okay, so I'm just going to copy some of this. Pardon? Register view model. You have to go to under account view model. Under account view model, you have all the register view model, login view model, and so on. Let's see, I think I am recording. Yeah, I am recording. Okay, yeah, I have about 30 minutes, and it's a step-by-step process. There are many steps, so I'll go through. I'm just going to make first name, last name, and what else do I have? Phone, user, role, and department ID. So I'm going to make these required. So I'm just copying it off of email address. So this is going to be first name. I'm making it required, public string. Do I even need to put this in here? I don't really need this. I just need to have this display name, first name, and then the actual property itself. Okay. And I'm going to do the same for last name as well as phone. Okay, so I have my first name, last name, phone. The next thing that I require is I need a role. So I'll say required. This is going to be user role. Okay. And the last one will be the department. I want just the ID, so I'll say display. Well, the display name is department, but what the value that I want is just the ID, so I'll say department ID. And is that required?
Nope.
Why is it not required? Yeah, it's only the department chair, so it's not. If I make it required, it won't allow me it won't allow me to add a user who doesn't have department ID. So that's with the view model. Let's see, the second piece that I want to work on is the view itself. So I go to register.cshtml, okay, and what's it referring to? The register view model. So that's why I go from the view model first and then to the view. Okay, so inside of this, again, I'm using something pre-existing. I need to add to it. So I'm going to add these below. and I'll put them separately so that you can see them. And this validation summary actually basically says if the user doesn't do something such as provide a password with a confirmation, you'll find a message. If they don't match, that message will show up. That's what the validation summary does. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to, how many do we have? First name, last name, phone, user role, which we'll make as a drop-down list. And then we're going to have the departments. Okay, so let's go through this. The easiest one is, well, all of these are pretty similar, so I can just take email and use it for first name, last name, and then so I'll just leave a gap here and do it. So this is going to be the label for, and the IntelliSense should pick up first name is the label, and the input is for first name. Okay, and then so this will be a text box when it says input. And what will this validation be? What will it check for? Yeah. Okay, but if a user doesn't enter first name, what will happen? Okay, why would it not accept it? This validation, is there any form of validation? What did we say needs to be validated? It's required. We could also set some specific limit. So you can say string length should be, well, for first name, there might be somebody who, well, goes by a single letter. I don't know if somebody deliberately wants a first name with a blank or something. So anyway, so you probably don't want to set a minimum limit on it, but you have to provide some first name, similarly the last name, and that's the validation that takes place here. Similarly, the same thing for last name. So whenever you copy paste, please make sure you make all of the required changes. Otherwise, it's obviously going to mess it up if you have validation checks across different fields. Okay, first name, last name, phone. Okay, so we have first name, last name, phone, which are the easy ones. Then we have user role and the department. I said these three are the easy ones. Why are these? Well, this is going to be user role. Why is user role not as straightforward as the other three? Well, the user is giving, well, in this case, we are assuming it's some administrator who is doing it. Right. If it was just some random user, they shouldn't create a role with a very high privilege. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. We need a drop down here. So if you want to create a drop down, the easiest way, we can either go through the database, or we can try to use the instead of using input, we can say, do you remember what you used for drop downs? Okay. Well, the view bag is for getting data from the controller, but for the on the HTML side, it is the select. So anytime you have a drop down list instead of a text box, you use select, and then so since there are two user roles, and I've been trying to experiment, since the only two that we are currently interested in, I don't necessarily want to go to the database to get it, right? So, so one of the things, and this is, so one thing that I found is this, I can open, close the tag. And so when I open, close the tag, it means that I can create what? Child elements inside of it. Okay, so one of the child elements is the option tag. So I can say the first option is department share without spaces. So this is the text that shows up, and I can say remember it's a text value. Text is what the user sees, and the value is what gets passed behind the scene. In this case, strangely, you don't need the ID, but you need the actual name of the role itself, because that's what you assign a user to. Okay, so this, let me close this out. Okay, so basically I'm saying one option is this, and then a second option is I'm going to use, it's a coordinator. And the validation for this is slightly different for a drop-down list, which I've now forgotten. So I'm going to take away the validation for now. I'll just make a note of this. I'll just comment this out. There's my comment option. Right here. I'll comment this out. The comment is, it's a sort of a peculiar tag with the @ symbol and the asterisk. So the validation is, as I said, different, and so you'll have to check. So you have to have sort of a I'm sorry, I put department share here. It has to be coordinator. And just to make it a little faster, I'm going to put. The third one is I'll just say choose. Okay, I'll say choose user role. So what I have to do is to check. So when I'm validating, I have to check if the value is choose, and I forget the syntax, so I'll do that next class. So what do I need to do? If the value remains at choose, it means that the user has not selected anything, right? So, which means I shouldn't proceed further. And I can also get, so that's if I want my own sort of, it's a smaller set of drop-down list values, so I hard-coded it. right? So instead of going to the database. The same concept I need to use for the department label for department ID. Do I want to do that, or, well, I want to call it department, so so instead of saying ASP label for, yeah, actually, I did use a label which was different from department ID. Do you remember that? What did I use for it? So it will say department, so it's not going to say department ID. Okay, so I'll use that, and then I'm selecting this for department ID, and over this, I'm going to instead, so if I just have a few departments, I could use the same approach of hard coding it. But if the problem with hard coding is that you cannot, to change it, you actually have to go into this file to change. So the users don't have control over it. So if you want to give control to the users and the values, there could be departments added, removed, and similarly even with roles, you probably want to allow the user to add more roles if they wish to. Currently, we have fixed the roles, so that's why we are saying we'll go with this. So if you don't want it to be hard-coded, what do you need to do? Go to the controller and the register method, and then we have to go to the database and get this. So how do we get it from the database? So it's going to be is database. Okay, there's no database. So why is there no database? Where do you get access to the database? What is this? I shouldn't just be hearing Abdul Rahman's voice. Somebody else? Okay, I need to refer to the DB context, but what is account controller? How many of you know the answer to that? Some other hand? Okay, I finally know how to pronounce your name. Aurelian, right? You know why your name is so hard for me to pronounce? Well, RDR doesn't, in my mind, register. But Austin was pronouncing your name, and he said Aurelian, so it's easy. So R is R, and then it's Trillian. Okay. Anyways, that's an irrelevant thing I just said. But coming back to this, what's this? It's a constructor. So we are assigning any of the service through the constructor, right? So what do we need to do? How many of you know what we need to do here? Okay. Jacob. I'm trying to force myself to look this side. Is there anyone this side? Okay, let me go back to Aurelian.
We have to have like what Austin said, we have to have the
Okay. All of this, it's actually, you have the pattern here, right? So we are creating these. We did this for the other controllers. We created a DB context, but we have to create a private. So far we've not made it read only, but it doesn't. You can make it read only, and as Austin said, it is application DB context, and it doesn't show up. So what should I do? Get the using statement. What do you want to call it? database. And if you look at the conventions that Microsoft is using for MVC, what are they using here? The underscore is for the these are what would you call these here? Good. Attributes, not what? Not properties. So they are very specifically wanting to keep it with making it private and read only. They really don't want it to be properties. So if you're going to use that notation, it's using the underscore for the properties. And how do they distinguish it from what are these called? If you're doing an interview, let's see, Jacob, what's Jacob read? What is this called here? Yeah. No, these are not called attributes. What are these called? No, these are not variables. Parameters, yeah, they are parameters. What's the difference between a variable and a parameter?
Variable stands on a parameter that's built attached into the method.
So it is a means of passing a value into, usually into the method, but also you could pass it out. Okay, so this is going to be a parameter, and the parameter convention is. I put a comma and then what is the data type? Okay, application, DB context, and I'm using the Microsoft convention here. How will Microsoft name this parameter? A database without the underscore. So that's how they distinguish the attribute from the parameter. And so when you're assigning, it will be underscore database assigned to the parameter database. Okay, so now when we go all the way down to where is our register? Okay, the HTTP post, or is it HTTP get? Which one of these methods? The get, because we want to populate the view that the user is seeing, so this has an underscore or not. Whatever was in the parameter, can you see it in any of the methods? The answer is no, you can only see it inside that particular method. And what was that particular method called? Now that I know to pronounce your name, Audrilian, what the constructor. So that's the method, and that the one without the underscore could be seen only inside the constructor, right? So that's why when I did this, it doesn't pick it up. So what do I need for it to pick it up? Underscore, right? So okay, so that's so database dot what? What were we trying to accomplish? Database dot departments. We want to find the list of all departments. So that gets me the list of departments. And when I want to, what do I want to do here? I want to send it through this has to be a select list, right? I'm creating a new select list, and this has to contain the department ID and the department name. So how do I show that? Within strings, department ID, and I'll just break it up into two lines. Department name, and I told you it's there's a name, there's a text, and then there is the value. The text is what shows up in the drop-down list, and the value gets sent behind the scenes. Which is the text and which is the value here? ID, correct. Okay. So this is the text and this is the value. Now, I need to encapsulate it into something. What's that something? View data. And I have to specify a name for this view data. And what's what's the name that's appropriate here? This is a list of departments. So you try to give meaningful names. Okay, I'm just going to do this to make it visible here. And I did this so that we can go to our view. So this is, where is my view here? Okay. All right. Yeah, it's right here. So I don't want this. So I'm going to say, okay. So here, instead of having it in drop-down list, I'm going to say, what do I use here? It has to. It's a property called ASP items, and ASP items within the string, it's going to be, I need to provide within quotes view bag dot, what's the name? Okay, department. So keep in mind, on the controller we call it view data. On the HTML side, on the view side, we call it the view bag and retrieve the values. Okay, and then I'll say option, I'll just say optionally choose whichever optional, well, I'll just say optionally choose department because it's not required. And the value that I'll send here, I'm not going to say choose. What should the value be? Can it be a string? It's an ID, so it should be an ID that doesn't exist, so an ID like 0 because it's not, 0 is not auto-generated. So that tells me the user didn't select any department. Okay, so yeah, less than 5 minutes. Okay, trying to figure out how far we can proceed now. So we have set up our UI. Let's see. I'm going to put a breakpoint to see. So after, when the user enters the value and clicks submit, it'll come to this post method of register, right? Hopefully you understand that. So it's going to send the model, this register view model, so that we can go into it, and this part we will explore a little later. And so what I'm going to do, since we only have, let's see, to user, okay, new application user. Actually, this uses, I can use the constructor to do it. So user, so I need to check and see now. Okay. Let's see. I'll do an if statement. If model dot user role if this is going to be department share, I have to do something else. I have to do something. Okay, so I'm going to say, so I don't want to do this one here, variable user. I'm just going to comment this out, and instead I'm going to create an object. Well, I'm just going to call it application user. Okay, application user, and I'm going to set it to null initially. Okay. Now you have to tell me if the user role is department chair. You can see where I got this, right? Through this model that's being sent from the view. If what should I do? User equals new. What? Is it application user? New department chair. Do you understand this? Right? If the user role is department chair, and then I basically pass in all of these values, right? Where do I get all of these values? From the model and pass it to the department chair. So model dot, what's the first one? First name, and so on. Okay, so this is something you're going to fill up, and I'm going to comment out for now. So if the user role is not department chair, what am I doing? User equals new what? Yeah. Okay, application user. And you have to pass in the values. Okay. And again, I'm going to, well, just to make this work, I'm actually going to, I'll have to remove all of this and keep an empty one. But that's, you understand what you need to do here, right? Okay, so you have to fill these out, and then we have whatever else. We'll go through this process here. User, I'm creating a user, and then I'll have to put in the role. But I want you to fill up these two before you come. Yeah.
So the last thing is the department ID integer is complaining.
Where is it complaining?
If you fill the construct like this.
Oh, department ID. Is there a department ID? Okay. So if I do
Just like the argument system, I can convert functions in.
but is it coming in as a string?
Yeah, I think when we created it in the model view, we created it with a string. Or at least that's
Okay, so what if it's going to give that problem? I'll have to check it, but one simple solution is, okay, convert it, call create department ID equals to convert to int 32 model dot department ID, and then instead of using model dot department ID, use this one. Okay, I'm going to comment this out for now, and I'm just going to take one extra minute to just do this. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. How can I test up to now? Obviously, there are missing pieces here. So I'll put a breakpoint here, and what does that accomplish? I'm going to build and run it in debug mode. So what am I trying to check here? Okay, whether it reaches this point and whether we have these values. So that's one of the ways of testing again on your project. So I'm going to run this in debug mode. So next class I'll start exactly at this point, and I'm expecting you to have set up the parameters. And the other thing is I'm expecting you to have made progress on your project. And obviously, okay, so if I click on register now, okay, it should give me whatever, I'll just say. When we are doing the next test, actually, I want to use my actual email so that I will actually get it. These two don't match. I thought, okay. Okay. Okay, user role, and then, okay, so if I click on register, it should go stop here, and if I look inside the model, it should give me first email, department, and all of this. Okay, so set it up here, and then we will discuss how to connect this to a role, and then we will discuss how you can send an email confirmation. Okay, I'll stop here. As I said, I'm expecting you to have done this before you come to class on Thursday. Yeah, normal hours I'll be there 11:30 to 1, but I won't, since nobody's coming, I won't be there in the evening.